السلام عليكم ورحمة الله. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. نحمده ونصلي على رسوله الكريم أما بعد. Because the mandate for Ramadan has come from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala himself. So the first thing to note is how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala deals with Ramadan. That this is a month in which the doors of Jannah are flung open, the doors of Jahannam are closed, the rahmah of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and His forgiveness are showering upon mankind. The rewards of deeds are immensely increased, exponentially increased. So when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has so much love for this month and so much importance for it and has given such virtue to it, then it follows that the entire realm of the heavens is excited about this month. And because this is the month of the Quran, Jibreel alayhi salam used to become very, very diligent and active with the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wasallam and the Quran. And the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam would respond to this month by increasing and intensifying his worship, his routine. And in the last Ashara, it reached a peak. And the Prophet ﷺ's mood would change in this month. Like the hadith says, Kana Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam ajwad al-nas. He was already the most generous person. One Bedouin came to the Prophet ﷺ, he said, Altani, give me something. So the Prophet ﷺ pointed towards a valley. It was filled with animals, sheep, goats. He says, you see that valley filled with animals? He says, yeah. He says, take them all. He said, what? Yeah, take them, go, take them. This man couldn't believe it. The Prophet ﷺ had to convince him that, no, I'm giving all of them to you. So he went back to his tribe and he says, oh people, you should accept Islam because Muhammad ﷺ spends like a person who has no fear of poverty. This was the Prophet ﷺ's state in normal conditions. But in the month of Ramadan, the Prophet ﷺ's jood, his generosity, was كَالرِّيحِ الْمُرْسَلَةِ, like a free-blowing wind. And that specifically was حِينَ كَانَ يُدَارِسُ جِبْرِيلَ بِالْقُرْآنِ, when he would recite the Quran, revise the Quran with Jibreel alayhi salam. That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has sent this angel, the most noble of angels, the closest angel to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Allah azza wa jalla has sent him to revise the Quran with me. This made the Prophet so happy that his generosity knew no bounds. So it followed that the Prophet ﷺ's companions, his followers, they would push and exert themselves in this month. And if we were to extract the Ramadan of the Sahaba radiallahu anhum, the Tabi'is, Atba'u Tabi'in, and so on and so forth, we would be able to compile many, many volumes of what their Ramadan looked like. But first, let's understand a few things. Number one, the objective of Ramadan is to either give us or increase our taqwa. If a person is not meeting the minimum standard of taqwa, then he should come to the minimum standard. If somebody is fulfilling the minimum standard of taqwa, then he should increase his taqwa. The minimum standard of taqwa is that a person is always abstaining from all of those acts that are displeasing to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Abstaining from what is haram or close to haram, even if it doesn't have the label of haram, if it's close to haram, like makruh, tahrimi is just like haram. In terms of practice, there's no difference. Similarly, those things that are fard or wajib, and most of the fuqaha do not make any distinction between what is fard and what is wajib. So fulfilling all the wajibat, whether it pertains to worships or huquq, duties and dues, whether it pertains to akhlaq. There are some akhlaq that are absolutely haram, and there are some that are fard. So, kibr, arrogance, for example, is from the akhlaq. It's haram. Responding to a Muslim's salam is wajib. It's a haqq. It's something to do with interpersonal relations. Being honest in a transaction is fard. Being dishonest is haram. Deceiving someone, man ghashana falaysa minna. Deception is haram. So identifying the various areas of life that affect us and fulfilling the commands of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the instructions of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam in all of those areas, and abstaining from what we call the manhiyat, all of those things that have been prohibited, forbidden. This is the lowest bar of taqwa. So for those who are not there, Ramadan enables them to get there. For those who've reached that level, where they're fulfilling all their duties and obligations, they're abstaining from all things that are prohibited in the deen, now it's time for them to increase. And Ramadan gives us the perfect setting. The removal of excessive food and drink from our systems serves to do two things. Number one, it serves to weaken our lesser and carnal tendencies. These are fed. The more we feed and nourish the body, these tendencies are also fed. Greed, for example, the more the body is fed, the more the tendency of greed arises. Love of dunya, anger, pride. These things are also fed because these are carnal tendencies, lesser tendencies, they're attached to the body. So when food and drink is brought down to what is sufficient and not more than that, now we have a chance to feed the other tendencies. We have a chance to nourish the ruh. And the ruh, because it comes from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, it always yearns to connect with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And this is why a person cannot be fully satisfied or content until they are connected with Allah Azza wa Jal, no matter what they have of this dunya. So now we have this opportunity to balance things out a little bit, make the ruh strong enough so that the higher tendencies in a person, they start taking charge. They become prominent and dominant in our systems. So the tendency of khashya, the fear of Allah, khushu', humility in front of Allah, tawadu', humility in front of other people, connection and bond with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, trust in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, desire to worship Allah Azza wa Jal, desire to stand longer in front of Allah in salah, desire to remember Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala more. All of these beautiful tendencies, they start naturally getting stronger and stronger. So Ramadan is designed in such a way that a person generally comes out as a better individual. But there are some things, some checks and balances that we have to keep on ourselves. We won't talk about haram because insha'Allah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will protect us from all things haram. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protect us. Where practicing Muslims suffer and damage themselves is by doing the needless things that could potentially lead to haram or their borderline. And there are two things that we have to be very, very diligent about, especially in the month of Ramadan. Number one, fudulun nazar. Fudul means excessive or extra, surplus. Nazar, looking at things unnecessarily. Looking for haram is, we don't even think about that. But looking at things that we don't need to look at, this is fudulun nazar. So now, for us, one of the biggest challenges is the devices that we hold in our hands. Now we're going through a media feed, one after the other after the other. There might be some educational content, there might be some informational stuff, there might be some recipes for our sisters, there might be some hacks, there might be this and that. No, nothing harmful, I'm just going through. Is it necessary? Anything that is unnecessary is harmful. Remember that in the month of Ramadan, there is no time to be used on something that is unnecessary. Don't go to this discussion and shaitan will take us there. Oh no, is that haram? We're just doing this. I'm just passing some time. Passing? Passing these moments? What could be sillier than that? So looking at unnecessary things, whether it's the TV or whether it's social media or anything, even reading things that we don't need to read, like the news. World's not going to stop just because you're not reading the news. Nothing different is going to happen. Just because you don't know doesn't mean it's not going to happen. And just because you know it's not going to change the world. Put it aside. Who cares? It's not going to be from the questions that are asked on the Day of Judgment. And what was your president doing at that time? What was the latest updates with Doge? Put it aside. Just leave it. It's unnecessary. So fudulun nazar. And the next thing is fudulul kalam. Unnecessary speech. To say things that don't need to be said. To speak just for the sake of speaking, just for the sake of making idle conversation. It's not necessary. Therefore, it must be eliminated. Just because it's not necessary is the biggest reason why it needs to be eliminated, so it can be replaced with something that is necessary. My reading the news, what is it taking me away from? It's taking me away from reading the Quran. Oh, I was reading Quran, I'm tired now. Okay, so now reading the news is going to make you less tired. Read more Quran. Our Hazrat Rahmatullah Alayhi once shared with us that in one Ramadan, Hazrat Shaykh Rahmatullah Alayhi asked them, okay, how much did you read today? How much did you read today? How long did you read? How long did you read? So somebody saying, I read for this long, I read for this long. And when he asked our Shaykh, he said, yes, Hazrat, I started reading, but then I got a headache. So I could only read for this long. Hazrat Shaykh says, what does reading have to do with your head? You read with your mouth. Just like that. So imagine a Ramadan where all our time is filled with the dhikr of Allah and tilawat of Quran on our tongues. You have to imagine that happening. Picture that happening. So what does my day look like? Maybe you have to go to work. Maybe you have to go to school. So we need to mitigate or eliminate all unnecessary things. And this second one leads us to a third thing that also needs to be eliminated. Fudulul mukhalata. Unnecessary mixing with people, unnecessary interactions with people, unnecessary socializing with people. I think it's a tragedy, this tradition that we have, it's everywhere, of these iftars. The iftar. And they call them iftar parties. What a strange term. It's like as if iftar is an occasion to party. So what happens? People start getting ready from their homes well before Asr. Then they get ready and they drive over to the place. Need to make sure we're there well before iftar. That golden time of the ibadah of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that golden time of dua, where the dua is more likely accepted. That time which the Salaf Salihin devoted exclusively to the remembrance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and raising their hands in dua, as it gets closer and closer to iftar time, all of that time is spent in either preparing to go somewhere, or going somewhere, or sitting around talking to people. And then all of a sudden say, oh, okay, iftar is in, oh, okay, grab a date. And iftar is broken while talking. And then after that, the talking continues, okay, now we got to go for Isha. And some people missed the Taraweeh. Why? Because they had to go to an iftar party. So many unnecessary interactions. And the way the teachings are twisted, that no, it's so rewarding to feed a fasting person. If you help someone break their fast, you get the reward of their fast. Trust me, the people you're inviting don't need help breaking their fast. You want to help people break their fast? Go and send food to those people who are starving, who don't have anything to have iftar for. And I say this in this way to bring some balance to the equation, because this is an extreme. We've gone to the extreme. It makes people completely oblivious of the ibadah that could take place in the month of Ramadan. Shaykh Muhammad Zakaria rahimahullah, when Ramadan would start, he would sit with his Quran and he would read and read and read. And subhanAllah, he was gifted in many ways, but one of the ways that's not, I believe, is not highlighted enough is how clever he was. He was an extremely clever individual. He was always the smartest person in the room and never let anyone feel it. He was miles ahead. He was thinking miles ahead of everyone else. I read his autobiography, and every time I'm astounded at how intelligent he was. So he would devote his Ramadan just to the Quran. No time for anything or anyone else. And when he started reading his Quran, it doesn't matter who came, he would not look up, he would not pause his recitation for anyone. Not like us. We're checking to see is there any notifications, even though there aren't any. So someone came from a distant city to meet him. And when he came to Saharanpur, where he was, so he's asking his Shaykh. So whoever he asked, they had this terminology for him. They said, Shaykh is in Ramadan. He asked the next person, I came to meet Shaykh. Shaykh is in Ramadan. Asked the next person, Shaykh is in Ramadan. It was like their way of saying he's in Ramadan mode. He doesn't meet anyone. He doesn't do anything except what he has designated this month for. But he says, I came from so far, I came to meet him. So he went and finally made his way to where Shaykh was, in the house that he was. And he knocks, somebody opens the door, he says, I came to meet Shaykh. He says, Shaykh is in Ramadan. And so he said, well, let me see him. No, he's in Ramadan. So when he finally makes his way in, Shaykh is reading Quran. He says, Assalamu alaikum. Shaykh doesn't even look up, keeps reading. He says, Assalamu alaikum again. Assalamu alaikum again. And this guy gets angry. He says, what is this? Shaykh is in Ramadan. Is Ramadan some kind of a fever that a person can't come out of? I came from so far to meet him, this. And when he started making a big fuss, Shaykh simply said, no one invited you. No one told you to come. And if you really wanted to see me, you should have taken time and seen if this is the appropriate time to come or not. On your way. Shaykh Zakaria Mahullah had a habit of reading 30 juz every day in Ramadan. But I want to explain to you how he used to do it. His way of doing it was very different. The juz that he was going to recite in Taraweeh, he would recite that juz 30 times every day. The same juz. And he did this from the beginning of the Ramadan to the end, and that's how he would get 30 khatams. But imagine how strong his Quran was. Shaykh is in Ramadan. That's it. Full stop. There's nothing else to discuss. There's nothing else to talk about. If you want to talk about it after Ramadan. Right now, I don't have time for anything or anyone else. That was his ibadah in the day. And his iftar would be, he would have a date. He'd have half a cup of tea that he would just toss back. And then that's it, pray Maghrib, and then engage in nawafil from Maghrib all the way to Isha. And then Taraweeh. And then after Taraweeh, because so many people were coming to see him, he would sit with them for a little while. If he had something to serve them, he would serve them something, serve them some tea, some sweets, something, some snacks. And then he would go back to reading his Quran. And then he'd go to sleep for maybe an hour or two, and then get up and start his ibadah again. And the only time he would eat something was at the time of suhoor, just a little bit. And he would never ever finish his food. He would have half of a chapati with whatever was cooked, and then get back on the musalla and keep doing ibadah. And like this, he would exhaust himself all day, all night, all day, all night. These were people of the Quran. Their happiest time was when they were with the Quran. His father, Maulana Yahya Sahib, rahimahullah, the one who really trained him and did his tarbiyah, his own, and this is a lesson for all of us who memorize the Quran, who have memorized or who are trying to memorize. He had a very unique way of memorizing the Quran. And that was that he would do one page a day. He had to read that page 100 times, looking in. If he could do that, he didn't need to read his sabaq to the teacher. I know you know it. You know it better than anyone. Go. So this was his work. He had to read that page, read his sabaq 100 times, and then go play for the rest of the day. Go, you're free. When he finished his hifz, his job was to do one khatam every day. And he did this for 6 months. And that was looking in the Quran and reading. One khatam every day. He did this for 6 months. This man never needed to look in the Quran ever again. For the rest of his life, he read the Quran. He had a printing press, and he would be working in the printing press reading the Quran, and he would finish like half a juz, half a Quran, just there doing his work at the printing press. And he never looked at the Quran again until his Shaykh Rashid Ahmed Gangohi rahimahullah, one year, when the Shaykh's son was too sick to lead Taraweeh. So the Shaykh said that, look, Hafiz Masood is ma'dhur this year. He is sick this year. Who's going to lead Taraweeh? So Shaykh Yahya didn't have the courage to volunteer. He says, who am I to volunteer in front of such a great person that I'll lead? He said, I just couldn't. I couldn't summon the courage. And the Shaykh said this 2 or 3 times. Then, one day he said to me, he says, Wali Yahya, you're a Hafiz too. Are you not? And he's like, yeah, but... He says, this year you will lead Taraweeh. So he says, that I got really nervous. How am I going to lead in front of my Shaykh? How am I going to lead? And they were only reciting a juz and a quarter. The khatam would normally be on the 29th. So for the first 8 days, 1 juz and a quarter, then after that 1 juz. So he had to prepare a juz and a quarter. This is a man who regularly reads half the Quran every day from his memory. But he was nervous. So he said that was the first day after I became a Hafiz, decades later, where I opened up the Quran and I prepared that juz and a quarter. And then I asked myself, like, what am I doing? Like, why? He says, after the first day of Taraweeh, that fear and nervousness that I had, it went away. Then I went back to just reading from memory. Shaykh Gangohi rahimahullah was so particular about reading the Quran that he would also pray nawafil from Maghrib all the way to Isha. And then after Isha, said for a little while, when he had the chance, he would pray some more nawafil. And he would go home. But he would be reading his Quran even on the way home. And even on the way to the masjid. And even in between meals. Every little moment that he got, he's reading the Quran. His tongue is busy with the Quran all day. This is how these people spent their Ramadan. Some people say that, a lot of people shy away from talking about these things. They say, oh, that's a very, very high level. People won't even understand what you're saying. You know what? If we don't talk about it, yes, you will never understand. But isn't it our duty to know how the real people spent this month? Regardless of what they did. Businessmen, muhaddithin, mufassirin. Imam Bukhari rahimahullah, when Ramadan would start, his friends, his close people would gather around him to pray Taraweeh behind him. So Imam Bukhari rahimahullah, for Taraweeh, his practice was 20 ayat every day until he finished the Quran. Then in tahajjud, he would finish 1/3 to 1/2 of the Quran every night. And then in the daytime, he would do another khatam. So, every 3 nights, he would do 1 khatam just in his tahajjud. That's just him praying by himself. And every day, he would do 1 khatam of the day, of the complete Quran, before iftar. And then he would tell his friends, those who had accumulated, he would say that, look, let's make dua, because at every khatam the dua is accepted. So every day they would have dua. Dua of khatamul Quran every single day at iftar time. Subhanallah. This is Ramadan. And then he has another khatam, another cycle of khatamat happening at night time. Every 3 nights he's doing a khatam there. And then in Taraweeh he would lead according to the capacity of the people. 20 verses per rak'ah. The Salaf Salihin would close their shops. They would stop all of their other affairs and say, there's only one thing that should be open right now, and that is the book of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. If they weren't busy in reciting the Quran, they would be busy in dhikr or dua. So these people properly captured the essence and the reality of the month of Ramadan. Now, you see how crucial it is to remove the unnecessary things? We can't do this if our day is crowded with unnecessary things. We have to eliminate, we have to clear the schedule and bring all of our worldly functions down to the bare minimum. And every minute that we have, that we can possibly take advantage of, we need to take advantage of it. If we set a high bar of how much dhikr we're going today, let's say somebody has to go to school or has to go to work. That's fine. But if you set a high enough bar for how much dhikr you have to do that day, because you have a target, you're going to be filling in all the empty gaps. The problem is not doing what needs to be done. Somebody has to go to work, so they have to talk at work, they have to communicate with colleagues and so on, might have to attend a meeting, they might be busy doing something. That is not the problem. The problem is we're not using the available opportunities. Because we throw away the available opportunities, then even that time that could open up, it's lost. We're talking about using what you have. How many moments of silence could you have? What about on your commute? How can you make that commute precious? Make that commute, that 15 minutes, 30 minutes, 35 minutes, so valuable that it will appear like a shining light on the Day of Judgment. That it will come to your rescue on the Day of Judgment. That the land that you passed across, that you drove across doing the remembrance of Allah will testify for you on the Day of Judgment. Because that's what happens when we do the dhikr of Allah. It's about using the available time. When we start making use of the available time, we are showing Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that we have a great deal of value of this time that He has allotted us. If we're not even using the available time, forget about doing anything extraordinary. It's out of the question. That dead time, in between conversations, in between meetings. You're not going anywhere for lunch. That time. Learning to capitalize on every available moment. Hanging on to it. I'm not going to let this minute escape. You have to be greedy. A Muslim learns to be very, very stingy and miserly with their time and very, very generous with their wealth. And then raising the bar for how much Quran we're going to read. Based on what we see in the lives of the Salaf Salihin, including the life of Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, the emphasis in Ramadan is on reciting. You can read tafsir all year. Read a little bit in Ramadan as well, no problem. But the emphasis should be on reading more of the Quran. This is the sunnah. And this is the established practice of most of the Salaf Salihin. They would increase their recitation of the Quran. Now, based on your proficiency in recitation, your accuracy in recitation, your fluency and your speed of recitation, a good place to start is to do more than you did last Ramadan. Everyone's at a different place when it comes to the Quran. So a good starting point for everyone is, I need to do more than I did last Ramadan. And this way, at least, there's no fear of slipping back. You're only moving forward. Now, how much more can you do? Look at your schedule. Look at all of these dynamics and factors. Set a target, and then push yourself. It shouldn't be a target that's easy to do. It should be a target that's going to tire you out. And what could be more beautiful than tiring oneself in the worship of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? It's okay if you get a bit of a headache. It's okay if you're feeling a little bit sleepy, you're cutting down on your sleep. It's okay, it's fine. This is the month to do that. And this gathering here, the students of knowledge, we can't use what the awam are doing as a standard or a norm for anything. If you're just looking at what happens in your homes, in your communities, in your neighborhoods, you are going to be very, very misled. That's why we speak about the Salaf Salihin in all aspects of our lives, because they were the true standard of what is good or what is excellent. So let's backtrack a little bit. Eliminating all unnecessary things. Make a list if you have to. What are the unnecessary things in your life? So, going to, let's say somebody is going for groceries. That might be a necessity. But how much time you spend there is something that you have to moderate it. Like you're the moderator, and the person who's going there, you are putting them on a clock, and you're putting really, really hard restrictions that you can't be in that store for more than 15 minutes. Okay, there's only 5 items. Okay, fine. Even if you spend 2 minutes per item, that's 10 minutes. You need to be out of there in 10 minutes. You have to govern yourself in this way. Be a little tough on yourself. It's good for you. Remember, it's not the necessary stuff, it's not the necessities of life that will come between us and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It's how we go about fulfilling those necessities of life. You need to take a shower. You could take a shower in 3 minutes, you could take a shower in 30 minutes. What's it going to be? You need to make a phone call. It's an important phone call. You could do that call in 1 or 2 minutes, you can do that call in 20 minutes. What's it going to be? Time management is ingrained within Islam because time is so precious. And this is one of the beautiful things of Ramadan. It makes you a master of time management. And once you're able to prove to yourself what amazing things you can do in Ramadan, you will inadvertently ask yourself, hey, why can't I do this for the rest of the year? Maybe not to that extent, but I just proved to myself how much worship I can fit in. And I just proved to myself how many unnecessary things I can eliminate. Why don't I make that my lifestyle? When we were visited by a Jamaat from Abu Dhabi. And they came to Edmonton in the middle of winter. The coats and things that they had brought were nothing in front of that harsh weather. Minus 40, minus 45 degrees Celsius. We were in deep freeze. And the brothers couldn't go out. We said, we need to buy proper jackets and coats. So, their Amir Sahib, he passed away, rahimahullah, great man. So he said, look, this is the need of the Jama'ah, can you take us? So I said, okay. So I took these guys to the mall. They said, okay, which mall is it? I said, this is a mall. What stores do they have there? I said, there's a department store, and then there's stores, there's coat stores. He said, okay, fine. He kept emphasizing that we need to be in and out as fast as possible. So to facilitate that, I parked right in front of the store. He takes all the brothers in. They've already done mudhakara, guarding the gaze, remaining in dhikr, all of that stuff. And they go to one store, somebody finds one thing, somebody doesn't find, they go to the next store. Imagine we did that whole mall in under 20 minutes, and everyone, the whole Jamaat, had everything that they needed for winter, and we were gone. Some people, it takes them 3 hours just to pick a coat. But they were so focused that we need to be out of here. Why? Because this is the most despised place to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and we have left the masjid, which is the most beloved place of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We need to get out of here. We're not here to enjoy this place. This place is only there for us to fulfill our need. We don't need to spend an extra minute in this place. These are intelligent people. And that should be our approach to life. It's a need. Let me get it over with. It's just a need. Let me get it over with. A need. But when it comes to things of deen, let me enjoy this. Let me enjoy this. One of our mashayikh, it was time for salat, and it was time for food. So someone suggested that let's pray quickly and then eat. Shaykh Amun Hassan rahimahullah was there. So the implication of what the person was saying was that, okay, let's pray quickly so then we can eat, we'll be done and then we can eat properly. He said, no, let's eat quickly so we can pray properly. You're getting the objectives, you're mixing up needs with purpose. A need, no matter how important it seems, can never replace the purpose. It's just a need. The objective of our being here is ibadah. Everything else is just there to make that worship easy. And if it's not, it's a distraction. People used to go flock for i'tikaf with Shaykh Muhammad Zakaria rahimahullah. Hundreds of people, thousands of people. And in the beginning of the i'tikaf of Ramadan, he would make an announcement. Just one announcement. He would say, my dear brothers, you've all come here for i'tikaf, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala accept. He says, here I will not place any restrictions on you in regards to how much you sleep or how much you eat. Make your own routine, govern your own time. But there's one thing I will not tolerate. Just one thing. There's only one prohibition in my i'tikaf, and that is, I don't want to see people sitting together in groups chatting. He says, that I will not tolerate. And if I see anyone doing that, I will have them removed. No tolerance for that. You're wasting your time and the time of other people, and you're killing this precious time. It's better you rest. Give your body what it needs so that you can get up and do some ibadah. What is this sitting around chatting? So let's approach Ramadan with this attitude and push ourselves. Some of you might have questions, this and that. Put your questions aside. This is just a practical thing that you have to do. If nothing else, consider it a boot camp for yourself. If you're really spoiled, you know what? Suck it up, buttercup. Seriously, suck it up. Stop the whining. Stop the excuse. Oh, what if that happens? Oh, well, I have this situation, I have that situation. You know what? You and your situation are not that important. Deal with it. Face it. If this was a situation that was life and death, if it was a situation that your career depended on, or getting your raise depended on, you would suck it up. And you would not have a single soul to talk about your situation. And this is about our situation with Allah. This is about our situation on the Day of Judgment. This is about the most crucial of situations. So let's toughen ourselves up a little bit. Shaykh Rashid Ahmad Gangohi rahimahullah, that I was talking about, he refused to pray sitting down. His whole life. Right to the end. Even though he was ma'dur. He said, no. He said, I can't. So he would pray his fard salat standing up, but he would even pray his nafil salawat standing up. Even though he was in such extreme pain that from his bathroom to his room was about 15 steps. He wasn't able to walk all the way. He'd have to sit down in between. But when he reached his place of salah, he would force himself to stand in salah. He was telling himself, suck it up. Endure it a little bit. So this is the attitude, and we need to raise the bar in the whole ummah. When you start practicing Ramadan like this, wherever you are, whatever masajid you're in, even in your household, in the beginning people will say, well, what's wrong with you? It's okay, let them say it. Let them say whatever they want to say. But you are raising the bar for what Ramadan looks like in the world. And inadvertently, people will be inspired by you. And people will change what they're doing to come onto the same path when they see how much you're benefiting and how much you're enjoying it and how much you're into it and how it's evolving you and changing you as a person. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala enable us to see this blessed month, and may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala enable us to spend this month in a way that grants us utmost nearness to Him. May Allah Azza wa Jal empower us to conquer our own weaknesses and our own little hiccups, our own doubts and misgivings, and our own laziness and complacency. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala enable us to conquer all of those things to win His pleasure. وصلى الله وسلم وبارك على نبينا محمد وعلى آله وأصحابه أجمعين.